Good afternoon. It's Friday, September 6th, 2024, and we have a return guest researcher, Brian Parker. He's from Tactical Sovereignty, and you can find his group on Facebook. Do you have a Telegram, Brian, at all?
Yeah, I have a Telegram, but I don't really use it much.
I know what you mean.
I do have a Substack.
Okay.
Yeah, I can be found on Substack as well, and on WordPress,
Oh, yeah, WordPress,
and
yes.
YouTube, of course.
Oh, yes. What is your YouTube channel? Is it Tactical Sovereignty?
Yeah, it's just Brian Parker, Tactical Sovereignty, Brian with a Y. That makes it easier to find. But yeah, Brian Parker, Tactical Sovereignty. It's a YouTube channel. I pretty much just I use it specifically for the group, for the social media group, just to add additional information in there.
Cool. Well, I am going to let Brian Parker introduce us to some concepts that he has burning in his bones that he's got to get out. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the floor and let you tell us what we need to know. Go ahead, Brian Parker. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Thank you. If people recognize it, if maybe you're a Gen Xer, you recognize I'm wearing the Back to the Future hat this evening. And so I thought that that was ideal for the knowledge and information that we're going to be covering this evening, because this knowledge, I even would prefer to call it intel, because there's really three levels when it comes to looking for information or knowledge that's even used by the three-letter agencies. And they basically list them as one, information, which information you can find info on just about anything anywhere, but it may not be that reliable, may not be the best. Then there's knowledge, is the second one. And knowledge is stuff that's more specific, only certain people, and it's more accurate. But then there's intel, and intel, it's intelligence that is generally secret. Only people in certain organizations hold it. It's not really disseminated for the masses. And I prefer to call this evening intelligence, because these are things that I know for a fact that the powers that shouldn't be have this knowledge. They have this intelligence, but it's not disseminated to all of us. And by the time I get done here, you are going to see what I've provided, and you're going to notice it all around you. You're going to see it all around you. Um, I think it's best maybe to call this signs of the times, because everybody's looking for a sign. Everybody wants to know what's going on. They're looking for a sign. So this is really kind of signs of the times, and it's not really to be used or looked at as fear porn, but what it is kind of instructional, so that you can go over this info, go over this intel rather, and be able to use it to your benefit to adjust how your life is set up, how your life is organized. We use signs for things all the time in life. Medically, we use them like we watch our blood sugar, watching for diabetes, right? Use it as well for like your bone density. You'll watch grandma's bone density. If it gets worse than minus 2.5, you know that, she's maybe on set with osteoporosis. And, we've heard, the story a lot of times. People will say, oh, grandma fell and broke her hip. Well, no, she didn't fall and break her hip. Her hip broke and she fell down because of it as a result. And it was a result of that bone density. And we need to keep an eye on our structure and our bone density, our structure of our world around us, because they also are a precursor to things that are coming up. Fortunately, we're able to see this in history. We can look at different collapses of societies. Babylon, it's happened in India, Easter Island, it's happened in France, the USSR, Rome, Norse, the Olmecs. Look at the Bronze Age or the Tin Age. Look at the Anasazi or the Vikings. These people all rose and fell. France today is not the France that it started out as. And Rome today is not the Rome as it started out as. I've got a link on the channel as well to a speech that was given by Mike Pompeo. It was in March of 2019. And I just kind of laughed because he was confirming something I had said for a long time, which I had said, USA is the new Rome. And he's standing on stage in Jerusalem with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's spelling this out, that the USA is the new Jerusalem, sees itself as the new Jerusalem. It's the new Rome. It didn't really collapse in 476 AD. It just kind of morphed and kind of changed its name and moved somewhere else a little bit. So it's a perfect example of that. What I'm going to give is I'm going to give a list of 21 things that when you look at all these other countries, look at these other civilizations, these are things that collapsed within the civilization that led up to their final fall, and where they finally had to either join another country or reorganize, or they just kind of, like the Vikings, kind of like just disappeared totally, And because there's so many of these other countries that have just faded into the memory of history, and I don't want to see that for us. But the road that we're on, these precursors don't look good. I'm going to give you 21 of them. Number one is economic decline. On a side note, we hear people talking about the money all the time and issues with that. Economic decline has always been a big one. Number two is political corruption or instability. I think we don't have to look too far to find political corruption. And we definitely don't have to look too far to find instability. That box there, we can check that box off also. Number two is social inequality.
3.
This is something that has been started to creep in to the educational system and to the colleges, is this discussion of social inequality. And they also use the word equity, but I think they're kind of confusing the terms. And number 4 is the loss of national pride. Well, if you don't have national pride, well, what's one of the things you're definitely not going to have? You're not going to have soldiers. Every country needs soldiers for defense. They shouldn't be using them for offense like the USA does, or the US rather does, but you need them for defense. Well, if you lose national pride, you're going to have a hard time finding soldiers, and you can't conscript somebody to go and fight for the country. Especially nowadays, I don't know how many eligible people you could really conscript into that. Related to that is number 5. It's military overreach. Military overreach is something that's happened to a lot of these countries because they spread themselves too thin. And you try and dominate the world, and guess what? The world's not going to like you very much. So, you can't bomb people into democracy, which is what the U.S. tries to do. And like I said, they don't like you too much when that occurs. Number 6 is a loss of perceived morality. Everybody has their own moral standards, but when you erase morality from the education and from what's being taught to people, you're definitely heading down a slippery slope. And number 7 is a loss of natural resources. I don't think the USA has to worry about that too much. So instead, what we've been seeing, though, is a perception of a loss of natural resources. There's this Gates guy out there buying up all the farmland, right? What's that going to do to the food resource? Well, we have limitations put on drilling or fracking. What does that do to that resource? It starts to create a perception of a loss of a natural resource. Number 8, related to that, is environmental degradation. And environmental degradation can be seen in a lot of different ways. And this is well something that can be perceived as well. We've got something out there called climate control. There's spraying. That list could go on and on. I probably shouldn't touch that too much.
Mm.
Number 9 is intellectual decline. Intellectual decline is important. And I hear people all the time, I think there's an average school of thought that says we're smarter than our forefathers were. Well, if people think that, I recommend you go online, look at the 1892 8th grade equivalency test, and see if you could pass it, because I guarantee you could. And we look back at those people, and a lot of them only had maybe an 8th grade education. I'll tell you what, that 8th grade education, see if you can pass their test. See if you are actually smarter than they were at that time. Number 10 is centralized authority. The USA has experienced this problem of centralized authority ever since 1789, when Congress wanted to do away with the Articles of Confederation. They want to do away with the Articles of Confederation because they didn't think there was enough strength there, but it definitely wasn't enough centralized strength. And so the Constitution of 1789 created the federal government. You can read that right in the preamble. The United States created it for the control of the United States of America. But centralization is going to come up again because that is a biggie. Demographic changes. Demographic changes are seen in a lot of ways. If people see what's going on in the hotels in New York right now, that can be definitely seen as a demographic change. Demographic changes have been experienced in England and Scotland for at least 15 years that I know, because I remember talking with friends from Scotland 10, 15 years ago, and they were complaining that public housing was not really available for the public to use. It's similar to like the United States has Section 8 housing, very similar. Well, they weren't able to use it because a whole lot of people from some other country had been brought in, and they were consumers of all this public housing, which means their subjects, which in the US are called citizens, their subjects did not have access to those programs. Number 12, and this is bigger than most people I think would probably assume it to be, but it's a loss of faith. And I'm not just talking, spirituality, religion. You're losing your grounding. You have to have that grounding. Number 13 is a loss of financial power. Gen Xers today have 90% less purchasing power than their mothers and fathers did when they were that age. That's important. 90% loss in purchasing power. That's definitely a loss of financial power. Number 14 is a gap in wealth. And I know my whole life I've heard that issue raised. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Well, that can only go on for so long before a lot of the poor decide to grab their pitchforks and storm the castle. It's just something that has naturally happened with all of these countries over time. Number 15 is lower coordination. And it sounds more complex than it really is, but coordination is you're speaking with each other among groups and things like that. How much contact you have with society around you. The different like book clubs. That's a great way to coordinate. And I see a few of those starting to sprout up a little bit more recently. So I think people are realizing that coordination, that we need to be in touch with the people around us. I think after 2020, we definitely noticed that problem because people were being forced into, I'll say, isolation. which is the number one threat to mental stability and to your health, both categories. That thing is number one. Number 17.
16.
And this is going to touch back to something else as well.
I missed 16. What was 16?
16?
Yeah.
Oh, God, how did I skip over that? That's a biggie. Reproduction is number 16.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it takes that they found that what it takes for a society to continue is there's a baseline for reproduction that society has to be at. And that baseline is 2.7 children average per family. And they found that any society that fell below 1.7 or 1.8 never rebounded. They never returned. They never came back. They continued their decline. That's at like 1.7, 1.8. What do you think the US is at today? It's at 1.6. It's already crossed that threshold of no return. This is serious. I mean, get out there, guys. Start, guys and gals.
Go make
send
babies.
your bunny rabbit. All right. Number 17, I think I mentioned already, loss of religion. Number 18, loss of information. This kind of ties back to, it sounds like maybe loss of intelligence, but it's very different. Loss of information. Think censorship. That's a big one. And we talked about Rome earlier. Well, that word censor is an English word. It comes from Rome. They had censors in Rome. You could only say nice things about the emperor, who was a god. Also, he was also viewed as a god. And the United States has carried on with that tradition. If you go into the Capitol building in DC and look up, you see the apotheosis of Washington. Apotheosis means the rising to the level of godhood. So even written into the history of the US is still using that same idea as the emperors of Rome used. And lots of information. You got Brazil just got rid of X, right? And we're seeing a lot of the fights and arguments amongst different factions about who can be on X, who can talk, who gets banned. You know what I mean? That is a loss of information. Number 19 is a top-heavy government.
I missed 18.
If I recall correctly, 18 was loss of information.
Oh, yeah.
Loss of information.
16 was reproduction.
17 loss of religion.
Oh, loss of religion. Okay. I missed loss of religion.
Yeah. You need that baseline.
Okay.
That gives you a foundation of who you are. You know what I mean? Something to believe in. You have to have something to believe in. There was an issue they were having a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago. It's like 5, 6 years ago, I think it was. Bringing salmon from Alaska, keeping them alive, and shipping them, I believe it was like to Nova Scotia or something like that. Problem is that the majority of the salmon weren't making it. Okay. So somebody within the company said, you know what, this is what we'll do. I don't know if it was the lamprey or some type of eel that they introduced into the fish tank. It is a natural enemy of salmon. So they introduced a handful of those into the fish tank. So now those salmon that were on this long voyage had something to fight for, right? They weren't just sitting there floating around the water, da 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 da. No, they had a purpose. You have to have purpose in life, otherwise you're in decline. You know.
Strength.
Anyway, I said 19. Top heavy government. One of the things that hurt Rome the worst was they were top heavy. They had welfare programs, and eventually there was too many people sucking off the teat of the government than they were that were refilling those teats. if I remember correctly, it was during the Obama administration, they found that there was almost more people in working in government and government agencies and government subsidiaries than there were actually working in the general workforce. That is a top heavy government, just like Rome,
Wow.
back in 450s.
Hmm.
Number 20, education not being based on personal growth. And we know if you study the history of education in the USA, it was based on the education of Prussia. That's not Russia, but Prussia with a P. Why you would take a system from another failed society and use it to raise your people with, your inhabitants with, is beyond me, unless you are inducing failure. Um, Number
21?
21 is the last one. I went to, I went to 21 because I'm a, by trade, I'm a casino dealer, you know, so a lot of blackjack. Hey, 21's a good number, right? You've got your 3 7s, right? Your 3 7s are 21. And it's been a great industry for me because I get to meet a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. You know, I get to know retired judges, get to know people in the medical field, get to know people that are contractors, and I'm not just talking about building. All right, I had one guy at my table one time. Somebody asked him, you know, where he's from, what he does, and stuff, and he said that he played for a Christian softball team. They traveled to USA as a Christian softball team playing other softball teams. And I looked at him and I said, wow, what a great cover. And he just glared at me because to me, that's obvious. It's an obvious cover. You know, you're doing something else traveling around all these other cities. Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
up front.
number 21 is up front. Number 21 is back to centralization. Your news is centralized.
Mm,
So
mm-hmm.
if all your news is being fed to you through the same sieve or through the same strainer, you know, you're not going to get anything. You might get a slightly different tilt on Fox than you do CNN or PMSNBC or one of those, or even the BBC. But you're generally really just getting the same garbage coming down the drain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it comes back to centralization again, and the news is all being centralized. If people in the US notice, it seems like everything that happens in New York has to become everybody's problem. Well, why is that? You've got AP, you got Reuters, you've got your top three news producers that are all located in New York City. So, of course, guess what you're going to hear? You're going to hear all the New York crap, and their problems have to become your problems. But guess what? They're not. They're not the issues. I mean, what happened in 2020? I'm on Florida. What happened in 2020? Florida should have been the worst place to be in the world because we have so much international travel and we have so many elderly people here. But no, for some reason, it seemed like all the chaos was happening in the hospitals of New York City. So, anyway, these are 21 basic things that I think we can all do something to tweak or change in our own lives to make things a little better and share this list out with other people and make sure people are aware of, hey, because you can go through this list of 21 things and the US checks off every box. They check off every box. I was talking to somebody earlier today about this and he said, oh, he says, Brian, he says, you know what, in the future, AI is going to do everything. And I just laughed. Like, no, number one, AI is a lagging system. But where does it get its information or knowledge or intel from? It gets it from the things that we put online. So maybe we need to put stuff like this, more and more information about this kind of thing online to let AI know, guess what? You're not smart enough. Because right now, the USA has checked off all 21 of these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if these are the people you're learning from, you're definitely not going to be a help. I mean, what's AI going to do? Is it going to run across Mein Kampf? Is it going to run across the 10 planks of socialism that's found in the Communist Manifesto and say, oh, this is the way to run a society? Well, we know those things definitely don't work. AI doesn't know any different. No, AI is not going to be the answer to anything. It's actually going to be us that do it. And it's us who have to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Dirty old Uncle Sam ain't going to help you out with that. And that's what I've got this evening.
Wow. Well, I wrote all of those points down, and I'm sure you probably have your blog that has those too, but I can put that in the description box for people. We have about 7 minutes left. Did you actually try to do the GPT chat and ask GPT or AI what things can we start doing to make changes? I mean, have more babies, that's one of them, right? But
Yeah.
I
But
want
I think we can find a way to reverse all of these things. Like, for instance, less of religion. I'm not saying become a Methodist or a Baptist or a Hindu or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, get more in touch with your creator, whatever you want to call, that energy, that power that runs everything. Of course, we can't do much about top heavy government, but we can stop using those services and stop using those agencies as much as possible.
Hmm.
And I think we can go through that list. I mean, we can find some way we can tweak things in our life. I've got a Chat GPT account, and I've done quite a few things on it, but I've also found that it lies about stuff.
Yeah.
I found that it will give you good, solid information. Like, for instance, if you want to know how to organize like a motion for court, it will show you how to organize a motion, how to type it up, how to list it on a paper. But if you ask it to give you cases regarding certain things, guess what else it's learned from people? It's learned how to be a bullshitter.
Hmm.
And it'll give you cases that don't even exist. No such case. You go on Westlaw, and those cases aren't there. So yeah, Chat GPT. If people rely on that, rely on AI, well, guess what? It's learned from us, and it's learned how to lie. Although I guarantee you this evening that this list of 21 things, these aren't lies. These are things that you can go back to these other failed countries and failed societies, and you'll see they had all these things in common. And um, it might not be as crazy if you just saw, oh, we got 4 or 5 of those things in common. But when you can check off all 21 of those boxes, now I haven't written this out and put it on WordPress or on my Substack yet. I'll do that at some point in the future. Um, Fortunately, I I've decided in the past to go and start studying. Beautiful. There we go.
I'll be putting it here.
In the past, I've decided to go. There you go. I've decided to go out and start studying and researching as much as I could find, especially information and knowledge that isn't in print anymore. If I could find books that are only accessible online, I would download them and print them out hard copy myself. Because there's a reason why they don't want to have some things in print. And when you read about these different societies, it's like after a while, it's like, you know, you don't see a point in it. At some point, it's like, oh, okay, I'm just reading about another. Da, da. But then all of a sudden, when you start connecting the dots
Mm-hmm.
and realize what's really happening here, it all starts to make sense, you know. And when it starts making sense, that's when it starts getting scary. That's basically called predictive analytics or statistical modeling. We have to do a whole lot more of those two things: predictive analytics and statistical modeling. Predictive, it's just like your car. You know,
Yeah.
normally there's a tab on the brakes that'll start a squeal when the pad starts getting low.
Mm-hmm.
That is a predictor for you to let you know, hey, guess what? Might be time to change the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these predictive analysis here is actually telling us, guess what? Maybe it's time we put on the brakes a little bit harder and start correcting these things. Because if we don't, how is it that this occurred to all these other countries, but it's not going to happen to the USA? Well, what makes us so special? You know, everybody thinks, oh, we get to vote, we got a constitution. Well, you know what? Russia has a constitution and they vote. So does China. That doesn't make the USA special. It's no different than what any other company has out there. Yeah, it was interesting. I listened to, regretfully, I mean, somebody was, Brian, please watch this. Watch the interview with Trump that he did. And he did with somebody actually like Sean Ryan. He's an ex-contractor. And about 3 times in that conversation, one time Trump definitely said company instead of country. And 2 other times he caught himself and corrected himself. And yeah, because what's he going to do? He's going to run it like the company. He's going to run it like the company it is. Because he wants it to succeed, because the more it succeeds, the more his other companies succeed. So anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for bringing
Thanks
up
for your time this evening,
history. Because like I've heard it said,
Absolutely.
If we don't remember history, then we are doomed to repeat it. And so the people that can see these things and mention them and speaking out like a trumpet, like you are being, it's very prophetic, actually. And the prophets need to blow that trumpet, sound out the alarm from the rooftops. And that's exactly what we're doing here on the internet, on YouTube, sounding out the trumpet, giving the alarm. So thank you.
Yeah, if you don't have the watchman on the wall to do this, then nobody's going to know. And people are going to look back and say, well, why didn't anybody tell us? Well, guess what? You're getting told right now. So this is a big heads up. These are just 2 of your watchmen on the wall that you're watching right now.
And I believe that Sukkot is coming around the corner, and we need to learn about that. If we need to learn about the origins of, you know, what God or Yahuwah, our creator, is wanting us to learn. Sukkot is the tabernacle of meeting. We should learn and do those types of things and learn about the Maseroth, or the signs, the stars, the sun, the moon. We need to understand about that. Go back to the ancient paths. And
the Maseroth was that was a Jewish zodiac, right? And those were used by farmers even as a precursor. You know, told them what time of year it was, what's going on. Hey, pay attention to the signs of the times, folks.
Sounds good. Thank you.